the cross-team misalignment is an issue. Often, like I mentioned a moment ago, silos, and we kind of think in terms of our own goals. And as marketers, what do I need? As sales, what do I need? Customer success, what do I need? And so we're oftentimes working with separate metrics. Yeah. We're not always speaking the same language. We're all just kind of almost working at cross purposes at times. And so that can be an issue when you're trying to get everybody rowing in the same boat.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Marketing Blender Show. I am Dacia Coffey, and I am so excited to introduce you to one of our fractional Chief Marketing Officers, Lisa Albert. And this is your first time on the show. Yes. So excited to show off your magic.
I'm excited to be here.
I love it. What I want you to know before I introduce the topic is Lisa's background is so broad in the best possible way. She's got business to business to consumer. She's got startups all the way to billion-dollar brands and brings such a wealth of knowledge. She's extremely data and progress focused. And the interesting thing about Lisa is her career really turned her into a revenue strategist, not just a marketing strategist, which made her a perfect fit for our team. And so welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Okay, so today's topic, which you did choose, was rethinking the customer journey. So funnel to flywheel. And all right, I know, marketing jargon alert, but this is actually really, really important, you guys. And so how you model your marketing and the kind of philosophy and framework that you apply can affect the quality of your outcomes and the impact of your decisions. And sometimes it can even create some blind spots.
Absolutely.
Why did you decide to pick this topic? Because I love this. I was like, let's go. I'm so excited.
A lot of topics I could have chosen, but this one feels near and dear to my heart because it's all about the customer.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that's what's most important. That's what drives all of our business, right?
Yeah.
And I had the opportunity to see B2B and B2C, as you referenced, and I think doing some B2C work gave me a chance to really better understand the customer and stay focused on the customer, and then trying to apply that in a B2B sense.
No, I'm so curious about that. I love what you're saying, but I don't want to make assumptions on why. I do, so business to business, so focused on pipeline. It's so focused on how does marketing impact and influence the sales cycle. Mm-hmm. But then B2C, even though a lot of times it's a volume play or you're further away from the customer, you're saying that's really where that passion for the customers came from. So why is that?
Probably most specifically with some time I spent in a arts organization where donors became very important to this. So it wasn't just about selling tickets.
Yeah.
We then wanted to create advocates that would continue on and keep filling the revenue stream. And so I think seeing it all from that perspective made me think in a B2B sense, why don't we think about it like that? We don't want customers just to get to the sale point and then we're done with them. We want to continue to have customers, right?
Exactly. Okay, so why don't you break down for our audience for the marketing jargon? What is the difference between deploying a funnel type of mentality or framework versus a flywheel? And what are we even talking about since we are talking about customer journeys?
So yes, you're right. It is marketing jargon, but I think the concepts are going to be pretty familiar to people. So funnel, I think everyone's going to know what a funnel is. We start up top with awareness and we get them to consideration, we get them to decision, and those are very linear and oftentimes transactional. I got to get you to the next point, let me do the handoff, so forth and so on. So the shift in thinking now is to a flywheel where you think about the customer at the very center of all of it, and then all of your actions surround the customer. And you think about it in terms of terminology like attract, delight, and engage. And so the attract part becomes your front end, usually where we're pulling people in, we're introducing them to us. Engage, we're starting to get them into consideration and actually making them close the deal. And then the important part is that delight part where we keep them engaged and come back around.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I always like about this is that, and I know I'm stating the obvious, but it bears repeating that this really is the customer's point of view, versus what's our sales cycle. Mm-hmm. It's what's their buyer's journey. Mm-hmm. Like, what are they experiencing? And so then it starts to organize the roles and the goals around what are we deploying to attract, what are we deploying to delight, And so I really always love that approach. Whereas a funnel, it's sales cycle metrics, and they may or may not be insightful around what's the customer's experience and how do we actually deploy things that increase those numbers, but from a different paradigm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So what is the benefit of funnel thinking for you?
So, funnels are very linear, they're very structured, they're very clear. There seems to be a path. It seems to be almost formulaic. I do this, then I do this, and I do this. I hand it to the next person. So there's some more maybe clarity.
Yeah,
in
like
it.
from a process standpoint.
Right.
Yeah, I hear you.
It just seems kind of more simple. But that's a pro and a con, in my opinion, and we'll talk about that in a minute when we talk Flywheel. I think it's also, there's the familiarity. Most people know what a funnel is, and so it's easier to adopt that idea and to get on board with it.
Exactly. I think just from making sure that everybody really embraces a funnel internally, one of the things I like about them is that idea of a leaky bucket, where, there is attrition happening. So there's a certain amount of visibility. And of course, not everyone is going to be interested in what you have to say. And only some people that are interested are going to convert into inquiry, and an inquiry into a conversation, into a proposal, into a win-loss. So I do like that. I think also from a marketing perspective, ironically, even though it is heavy on fill the sales pipeline, hence the funnel, you can help you solve the right problem because it's not always marketing's problem.
Right.
Like you can really see where the win-loss issues are, or if there is inefficiency in the pipeline, closer to the point of sale. And so the one thing I really do like about that, not that it always works in execution, but the thinking behind it was about alignment and about solving the right problem, and that you have levers all the way through, the entire marketing and sales pipeline. But doesn't go into delight, doesn't go into retention, very linear. And there's an assumption that anybody that fell out of the funnel is gone forever. And that's not true, especially if you want really good marketing ROI.
That's right.
Okay, so talk to us about the flywheel, benefits and disadvantages.
I think the biggest benefit is that we're thinking about the customer more than we're thinking about filling the pipeline.
Yeah.
And obviously that is part of it. We're going to do that even with the flywheel. But if we think about the customer and their lifetime value, then we start to think a little bit differently, and it becomes a little less transactional. As you know, B2B sales is a lot more relational, longer lead times, takes time to build those relationships, to get
the value
deal.
Exchange. Absolutely. These are complicated topics or complex buying scenarios. Absolutely.
And, they're spending larger sums of money. This is not the same as I'm going to buy a bar of soap and oops, I don't like the soap, I'm not going to buy it again, kind of thing. It's a
This buyer's
commitment.
remorse is dangerous.
That is correct.
Exactly.
So we want to make sure that we're doing it right. And so really thinking about the customer from the beginning and how it connects all the way through, I think, is the really important key piece here.
Yes. One of the things I always want to unpack for people is this is not just a nice to have paradigm shift. This becomes decision-making criteria. And I love what you said that about it not being transactional, because, a lot of times a sales funnel has language like discovery. That prospect does not care that they are in discovery. They do not care. That means you have no tools to optimize that, to create value exchange, and not having that language when you're in strategic planning and when you're messaging campaigns and when you're thinking, how do we maximize targeting? And where are they? Where's the message aligning with where they are in their journey? You literally takes all the tools out of your hand if you're only thinking our processes and our point of view.
Absolutely.
Yep.
One of the other reasons this is an important topic or interesting topic to me was some time I spent with a startup organization where not only was I leading marketing efforts, but I also was asked to lead customer success efforts as well. So it's cool in a small group, you get to wear lots of different hats, but I value that time because I was able to see it all the way through. And of course I was heavily involved with the sales team and in that process. And so really understanding what messages were being shared at which stages, and then making sure that those were consistent throughout was really important. I think so many times in the funnel, we get siloed and we just think about, well, what messages do I need for awareness? Done. And
Yep.
then we don't think about, is that consistent with what they hear in consideration? Is that consistent with what they hear, in the sales pitch?
Yeah.
And then further, now that they're a client, are they still hearing some of those same messages? Because we have to reinforce.
Yes.
So we don't have the buyer's remorse.
Absolutely. And, I think you're bringing up something super important. In business to business, it's not a message. So first of all, you've got a message based on your buyer persona, but also it's not a tagline. There's not one single value proposition. Like, yes, it's beneficial to make sure that everybody's aligned around that. But the messaging has to travel as that buyer learns more, builds context, starts comparing you to something else, is making business decisions. Because a lot of times the real competition is not you versus your competitor. It's you versus them doing nothing at all.
Right.
And your messaging needs to be able to travel, those hidden objections that happen all the time, because most deals are lost to no decision. So, even thinking about messaging as a journey, because it really is like what you say to somebody on a closing call where they're excited to get going and you're prepping for onboarding is wildly different than what you say in order to attract their attention.
Absolutely. Well, and to that point, I've seen sometimes in a funnel scenario, you've got sales folks who are just trying to meet numbers, and so they're just working almost like a machine, and they close deals, but maybe they didn't take the time to properly qualify the client, because they just were trying to close the deal, and they haven't thought about, well, what is the lifetime value that this client might bring?
Yes.
So am I really prospecting the right type of person that has longevity with my organization?
Yes. Okay. You bring so many good things. Okay. So one thing I want to unpack that Lisa just said is there's not just one flywheel or one customer journey. There is one per buyer persona, because she's talking about a customer journey, not all the customers' journeys. So having a single person in the center of a flywheel where you are thinking about what do they care about, how do they move through their business decisions, and then you're mapping that for alignment all the way through marketing and sales is critically important, and it gives you so much more to work with to maximize the success and quality of revenue. I just want to sit on that one so much, because not all revenue is created equally.
Correct.
Not all customers are created equally. They are not all perfect for the value that you deliver to people. And yeah, not targeting that and not turning it into decision-making criteria and really maximizing, how do we serve this human? And this is why we exist. It was because we're good. This is huge. And we do see revenue quality issues because people don't want leads. I know they come and they say to us, they want leads. They want revenue.
Customers and
That's
revenue.
right.
Yes.
Exactly. They want to scale. They want to hit their dreams. They want to hit their goals. They don't really want leads. That's just a tool to getting what you want.
Right.
And, this also, the flywheel is not lead focused. It is truly revenue and scale focused.
Yes.
Hey, Marketing Blender listeners, we have something exciting to share with you.
Our traditional YouTube show and podcast is expanding. We're going to be doing deeper dives on career, technology, innovations, and the stories behind amazing campaigns on our show.
Sometimes we have these conversations that are incredible, amazing. They've got wonderful ideas behind them, but they don't quite fit within our traditional model here on The Blender Show.
Yes, a perfect example of that is career advice. We get a lot of questions about that. We also get a lot of questions about AI and how things are changing and what to expect. And sometimes the best stuff is what we didn't say on camera. So this new evolution is where these moments get their chance to shine.
Think of this as our creative workshop, where we get to explore everything from breaking into the marketing industry to innovative leadership approaches, even interviews with CEOs, but all within the high quality insights you've come to expect from the Blender team.
And the best part, everything's self-contained. Whether it's a single episode on a very specific deep dive, or sometimes we will be even doing mini series, you'll be able to get exactly what you want, when you want, where you want it.
You'll be able to find this as a playlist on all of your favorite platforms, the same place that you already get the Marketing Blender Show.
Oh, and tip, there is going to be some subscriber-only content, so little benefit for you that follow us every week.
So hit that subscribe button, stay tuned, and we'll see you guys soon.
Let's talk problems first, because I think there are solutions to the problems.
Love it.
And then we can get to the how to align, how to make it happen.
I love it. You know, and it was interesting. This was one of the parts where when we were prepping for this, I was like, oh, I didn't even think to bring this up. So I love that you're going to go here. And it makes so much sense because you've worked with so many types of teams in so many environments, whether on the agency side, whether on the client side, like you said, large and small, you know, totally different business models. So, okay, so all this sounds so nice and theoretical and easy, but where some of the problems pop up? Like, what have you seen?
The cross-team misalignment is an issue. Often, like I mentioned a moment ago, silos, and we kind of think in terms of our own goals. And as marketers, what do I need? As sales, what do I need? Customer success, what do I need? And so we're oftentimes working with separate metrics.
Yeah.
We're not always speaking the same language. We're all just kind of almost working at cross purposes at times. And so that can be an issue when you're trying to get everybody rowing in the same boat.
100%. And man, those can be so tricky. Sometimes people, even semantically, even in the same company, are using different words to describe the same thing.
That's right.
And so then broken processes show up, broken handoffs show up, right? You know, opportunities. One team thinks it's been passed on, but the other team doesn't know that that is existing and they have action items on that. I mean, so many things can happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think one of the best ways to combat some of that is just a good old service level agreement where you sit with your teams and you come up with, these are the terms that we're going to use in this organization. This term describes this term describes this. This is the point at which this hands to this group, and this is what you do with it at that point.
Yeah.
And it's just having the entire revenue group, marketing, sales, customer success, all in the room and agreeing to the same terminology, same process.
It is such a big deal because that trickles all the way down to your scorecards. You know, I mean, even in our team, like we all try really hard to literally use the language the customer is already using, that our clients already use, because we don't want semantics to mess things up. If you call it X, then we're going to call it X in your scorecard, and we're going to make sure everybody agrees on that. So, God, that's such a good tip. You know, one of the things that just came up was disconnection from tech. Now, I have a tendency to frame tech as process and communication problems. So where do you go with that? Like, what have you seen?
It is that, but also using different pieces of technology. So I've been in organizations where you've got marketing using one CRM, sales using another CRM, and those two things may not communicate very well.
Oh, and then just throw ops in there using an ERP and accounting using this, and God forbid if you have a high compliance environment, then there's another layer of technology that's tracking something else. Yes.
I think that is a very common problem, actually. And you know, there are tools you can use to make certain systems speak to one another, but sometimes it's a rocky connection and it just isn't that smooth. Kind of goes back to that service level agreement. Are we calling it the same thing? Because I've seen it in one CRM, it's labeled as this, in the next CRM, it's labeled as that. Well, how on earth do we know that this is the same person that's transitioned through the journey?
Yeah, because side tip for our audience, most technology does not consider a lead the same thing that a sales team considers a lead.
Correct.
Like just that language of what tech calls a lead is not what a human calls a lead typically. Right. So yes, I love it. I love it. No, you have down here also messaging and brand inconsistencies. And I think so many people would be surprised by that because when you're thinking flywheel and customer journeys, there's this movement, there's this human interaction, you know, and especially in B2B, I want people to think about brand more broadly, like not just pretty words and pretty pictures. So what do you mean by that? Where are those inconsistencies coming from?
What I've seen is it typically is not so much in the top half of your traditional funnel. Yeah. It's the post-sale messaging. You know, most marketing and sales teams get fairly well aligned in what you're saying, you know, in the awareness stage to consideration to decision stages, but post-sale, they may not be saying the same thing that the client success team is saying. And so that's where the flywheel makes it so important to think about the journey all the way through. Because, of course, the success team is looking for, we want to renew this client.
Yes.
So if they're hearing something totally different than they heard when they first bought into our product, there's going to be a disconnect.
Well, and customer experience is a critical element of brand. Because as you get bigger and as things start scaling, you're supposed to see more referrals. You're supposed to see word of mouth and more direct traffic or direct inquiry coming to you, unless you're not getting that positive because there's some misalignment on your team. Absolutely. Okay, what else? Like any other big ones that we have missed in regards to just places where this can go wrong, even though people love the idea?
Yeah, I think you end up with cultural resistance to change sometimes.
Yeah.
I feel like, we spoke early on about the funnel being familiar and people are comfortable with that. This is a new kind of way of thinking, and not everybody's going to be on board with that immediately. And so if you don't have full buy-in from all of the groups and all the teams, particularly the leaders of those groups, then you're probably going to meet some resistance here. So it's so important to really understand why you're shifting in thinking and get everyone's buy-in on why the shift is happening.
I totally agree, because if you think about doing the journey, this is where the sacred cows come out into the light. Like all these hidden things where it's like, why are we doing that? Well, because we've always done that.
Right.
And there's no return on investment, but there's a lot of fear about not doing it. So a couple examples on that one that I've come across. Why are we going to that trade show if that's not our target, buyer persona? That's not our targeting parameters. Well, because we have to, because we always have. We've been there for 40 years or whatever it is. Another one, why are we doing so many case studies when none of the case studies on our website, there's no traffic to them. We don't see them deployed in the sales cycle. They're just sitting there collecting digital dust, if you will. And I do think, and I think it's easy for people to get defensive if they were the ones, oh, this is why we do this, or, and marketing has such an amazing, dangerous speed of change and pace of change that people just need to be like, no, it's not, like, it probably was a good idea. But, you've got to constantly be revitalizing that. So I think that resistance to change is interesting. It's amazing how much people do get really nervous about this.
They do. A phrase that would be important to help remind people of is shift from that, let's close the deal, to let's grow the relationship. And if they can start thinking more in that way, I think that makes that change feel better. It's not just this is something new or different. I think they can understand the value and why the change.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so what's your favorite way to facilitate like these flywheel discussions, or what are some of the different ways that you've done that to get everybody aligned and to start, turning this into decision-making criteria?
Yeah. I like to do a customer journey mapping exercise. It's one of my favorite tools. And it really is just an outlining of at each stage of the journey, and then taking each persona and asking a series of questions that really gets at the bottom line. What are their pain points? What are their motivators? Why might they buy? Why wouldn't they buy?
Why now?
Why now? Exactly. Yeah. Is price a consideration? Is it not a consideration? Or is this an emotional buy? Is this a financial buy, or a necessity kind of buy?
Exactly. I think buying committee insights, I think those are amazing too, like realizing that the sources of influence change. And so sometimes it's an internal sniper, or and even better, an internal advocate, but you've got to start navigating on their behalf as a partner to them all of the different voices that are going to speak into that decision, even if they're the final decision maker.
Absolutely. That's really key, because there's not usually one decision maker in an organization. I mean, there's one person that signs the final, contract, but there are probably 8, 9, 10, depending on the organization, people, including a gatekeeper.
Yes.
It might be just, the admin who answers the phone, but if they don't let you through to talk to the next person, you're dead in the water. So it's an important understanding of what each person at each stage needs to know and needs to understand. And then I think when you can map all of that out, you can start to see consistencies or inconsistencies and align all of those pieces.
I'll bring up a weird one that I feel is so misunderstood in B2B. And there's a reason, because it can play so many roles. But social media. So when you're thinking about a flywheel and a customer journey map, for some B2B buyers, that is proof and validation, right? Like, oh, they're real, and I really like what they're saying, and you get a more holistic point of view about their voice and what they stand for. For others, it's lead generation. Not not frequently, but sometimes, for others, it is staying top of mind of referrals. Or if you are the, 800-pound gorilla in the room, staying top of mind in front of an entire market, or having better targeting, or getting a new message or a launch out. But wow, where it shows up in that flywheel can be very different, and it can even show up in delight, where people are like, God, I just love these guys.
Right.
They stand for what I believe in this world. I love that I support them and I get value from them. And that is a very different social media deployment compared to like what it might be for some other companies. So yeah.
Absolutely. That advocacy is the part of the flywheel that is just unparalleled, and you can't necessarily get that from the funnel. So you're exactly right. So if you can get somebody to believe enough in you that they're going to share your information or advocate for you, that goes a really long way.
Oh my gosh, exactly. So this is the part, though, where I have to put my skeptic hat on as an advocate for our audience, and where I get very frustrated sometimes when I'm talking to prospective clients, because a lot of people have theoretically done this, right? They read a book, or they did a whiteboard session with their team, or they sat down and had a conversation, or they even mapped it out and then presented it to their team. And then nothing. And I think that's the danger of these is whether you have the traditional funnel, we definitely, while we use funnel language for scorecard, we definitely focus on the flywheel. But then so what? Because everything is that it became decision-making criteria. And now it needs to influence all the different places in your company, whether it is the customer experience team, or whether it is sales, or whether it is marketing. So for you, what's that transition? So we've done this, people are having their aha moments, we're getting some clarity, and then what?
Well, I think first and foremost, you've got to make sure you're aligned. All of the different groups and leaders of those groups, again, goes back to that buy-in. Does everybody agree that this is where we need to go? If you've got that, you've accomplished your first major hurdle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, and just even in that room, just to park on that for a minute for people, when you have a 360-degree point of view of a specific customer, and it's representative, operations, customer service, sales, leadership, marketing, and hearing, I love seeing people's faces when they have those mini aha moments, like, wow, I've never thought about the customer from that perspective, because they don't engage with them in the timeline.
That's right.
At that moment. And it's amazing what smart people do with smart information. You will see a lot of aha moments, a lot of really quality questions, even some nice, healthy side conversations, that thing we're working on, where all of a sudden this paradigm shift is really influencing their immediate work. So the alignment, especially with leadership, so leadership's not like, why are we doing that?
Right.
Well, because,
because they also have the ability to put a stop to what you're doing if they're not bought in. So
absolutely.
There's certainly that. And then I think doing the customer journey mapping exercise that I referenced a moment ago, or some version of that, where you get all the players in the room to think about each of those different stages and think about think through the customer's eyes. How do they experience us? What do they hear? What do they need to hear? How do I move them from awareness to consideration? How am I going to do that? What am I going to say? What tools do I need to use? Those things really help get everyone aligned. And I found in those, you get people really excited and interested, even in areas that are not necessarily their area.
Yeah.
But everyone has opinions about how the customer thinks. And so giving them a voice and allowing them to be part of that, you sometimes end up with a whole lot of extra information that you have to sift through, but that's okay.
Exactly.
You take it all and you decipher through what's the most effective for your organization. And
absolutely. And so often, it's not the quality of the idea. It's when and where is it deployed. We see so many clients where they're not saying the wrong thing per se, but they are definitely saying it in the wrong order or with the wrong emotion, because they are in contradiction to how the customer really thinks at that moment about their product or their decision or their journey. And so I think that's such a good point, that it's there might be a lot of information, but then we got to untangle the spaghetti. But that's why the flywheel is so effective about where does the customer need this and how do they reflect back to it. So it's not, oh, that's a bad idea or that's a good idea. It's how do we best serve our customers and our future customers.
Absolutely.
I love it. Where I go, and I know you do too, because you're so data driven, which I love. So for me, scorecards is what makes this real, where you take the customer journey and you think to yourselves as a team or marketing leader, okay, what can we see in the data that indicates our assumptions are right or wrong, or that they're making progress through their journey, and that our efforts are truly creating momentum, both for them to choose us as well as for us to hit our goals. So I am huge on the scorecard. Are there any other tools before we get into metrics that you're like, yeah, and to make this stick and to really scale a business, we've got to have X?
No, I think a scorecards are really just a good central place to have all of that information. And I think some of the areas that we're measuring, we're going to talk through in a minute. And I think having those as part of a scorecard are really important metrics to think about.
Yeah, exactly. Now, little caveat, we're about to go through a whole bunch of metrics that are really important to measuring and influencing the customer's journey. And these are on different cadences. So we'll try our best to tell you which ones are weekly and monthly and quarterly versus annual, but I want you to know that. And it's a little bit different for every company too. Like when you measure and when you check back in with your benchmarks is dependent on your client base, the size, the type of data that you have, and what kind of cadence actually changes your behaviors. Okay, where do you start with metrics? Like in whatever order, but what are some of the favorite metrics that you're like, okay, if we're thinking Flywheel, this is what we've got to have?
Gross revenue retention is an important one. I mean, like we said earlier, people come in and say they want leads, really they want customers and revenue, right?
Yes.
So at the end of the day, this is our metric to help us know, are we hitting that?
Yes. And I love this, Chief Marketing Officer is starting with revenue retention, not leads, not visibility, not impressions, not followers, but how much revenue are we building a foundation on that we can then continue to accelerate on? So I could not agree with you more on this one. I think it is wildly overlooked and so important because revenue can come from a lot of places.
Right.
Different product lines, different buyer personas, different markets, and even different places inside of your own company. Land, expand, how do we get a contract longer? How do we have lifetime customers? How do we increase referrals and evangelism from our customer base? So I love this one because this is so core. And people are not leading with it, which is extremely foolish in my mind because this is the tip of the spear for scale.
Absolutely.
I love it. Okay, what else?
One that kind of plays right into that is the lifetime customer value. We said it earlier, this is not transactional. I don't want a one and done. I want someone to keep coming back and stick around and possibly buy other products or, be a deeper part of my organization. So how do I do that for them? And so looking at their lifetime customer value is an important metric.
Absolutely. And that brings us to one of the next ones. So client acquisition cost or, customer acquisition cost. So I think so often people, well, they should be, but I do think, when people are starting to build scorecards or annual planning metrics that they look at this CAC, but it needs to also be in relation to the quality of revenue.
Right.
And so just minimizing your client acquisition cost is not necessarily winning.
Right.
It needs to be like, okay, what's happening here? And then what are we getting for it? And what's the ratio and what trends are we seeing over time? And then side note, you guys, if you're doing client acquisition costs, this is not cost of a lead. This is all sales salaries, all marketing salaries, all media spend, all trade shows, all collateral, all investment in growth. And I know your P&L might not be set up like that. Just do a little digging, get with your controller, just make some educated guesses and pull the numbers out because this is really, really important. We're talking total investment in growth, not cost per lead. So while we are fine with cost per leads, they are just one tiny little line on the metric and not all leads are created equally.
That's right.
So,
the thing I would add to that is not only is it about getting that cost down. Obviously, we don't want that to be a super high cost. Retention of a client costs a whole lot less than acquisition of a new client.
yes.
So again, a reason for considering the flywheel.
Yeah. I saw a statistic the other day, and it was that a 2% increase in customer retention equals a 10% cost cutting measure across the entire organization.
Wow.
Yeah, let's go keep more percent of our clients.
Correct.
Instead of just gutting everybody's budget and all their motivation.
Right.
Like, just such a big deal. But you're right. And this one starts to get complicated, but marketing is supposed to mature. Your scorecards are supposed to mature. You're supposed to get more return on investment as you go, but you have to build to that. But tracking that and really thinking, okay, we do have investment in customer retention, and eventually having line items and budget percentages that are assigned to that is so important. Because if marketing has not been taught to be aligned with operations and doesn't have a metric for customer retention, what are you going to work on? Your own stuff.
Right.
Like, you're not going to go to operations or customer experience and be like, hey, what do you need, guys? When you've got like this huge long list, unless this alignment that you were speaking about has happened already and everybody's really rowing in the same direction. So,
absolutely.
Okay. Expansion revenue. I love that you put this one on there because that one does have a tendency to just hide in the sales team.
Right.
And it does have a tendency to hide in quality of revenue, where everybody goes, just grow. Nope. Let's grow in the right way, in the profitable way, in places that lead us to scale and effectiveness long term. So, for you, what have you seen here? Like, where is it hiding, or, how should people be paying attention to expansion revenue?
This probably comes from my experience living in customer success land.
Yeah.
Because it was on the shoulders of that team to be looking for those opportunities. As we're just being good account representatives and talking to our counterparts at these organizations, figuring out what do they need. And then you think, oh, wait, you know what? We've got a service or a product or something that could help them do this. And so it's just being aware of those opportunities, looking for the opportunities, and capitalizing on those opportunities to share that information.
Yeah. Do you know what I love about this one, too, is that, you have listed on here Net Promoter Score, which I totally agree with. And for many businesses, NPS is really, really difficult to get, especially the higher touch or the higher levels of familiarity. People either give you a 10 or they won't answer.
Right.
Like, and so getting an NPS from a customer that is satisfied sometimes can be difficult, but your real Net Promoter Score is in expansion revenue.
That's right.
What percentage of your clients are landing and expanding, how long, back to lifetime customer value, but even how many years, what's your average size by segment, depends on what kind of data you have and where you're in your spectrum. But this one can give you an incredibly accurate point of view on how much value are you driving. Because if you're driving a lot of value, they want more of that.
That's right.
And you will see it in their trends as long as you're tracking it. And more importantly, sharing it with the team. Because what customer success might know could impact onboarding and even marketing and definitely sales.
Absolutely.
So,
and tied up in all of that is also churn rate, because that's sort of your opposite of your land and expand, right? And if you have a high churn rate, what's going on? Why are we losing people? And so having insights into that can make a huge difference in the opposite side.
Absolutely. And and it's interesting. I want people to think segmentation in their churn rate, right? Because it might give you insights on a demographic or quality of revenue issue that maybe you do or do not want to be chasing. It can give you product insights where you're like, wow, we're crushing it over here and we keep losing. Like, there's so much interesting information that can happen that it's not just, oh, we have a 10% client churn rate, or we have, horrible 50% client churn rate, or something ridiculous. But I find that insights on who are we losing? Why are we losing them? When are we losing them? Total game changers, because sometimes the answers reinforce difficult or exciting decisions that you make, whether around innovation, whether around targeting, whether around team, and like how they're doing. I mean, talk about finding the right problem. Love this one, as long as people aren't just off with your heads. I hate that number. Right. Like, go get some data.
Right.
So
I think looking at your referral and advocacy metrics, and so, I mean, these are all very closely tied together.
But
we want to look at, how many people are referring us,
And who,
and why, and kind of the same thing we just talked about with churn. If we're losing them, why? Well, if we're keeping them, why?
Yeah.
I want to understand that. What do they like about us, and what are they telling their friends about us?
yeah, exactly.
And so just understanding that helps make those decisions a lot easier.
And it's interesting because there's a lot of famous case studies, too many to list here, where a company, quote unquote, made a mistake. But then they paid attention to what was happening, and it was completely opposite of what they thought. But then they built a huge business on whatever that mistake was, or why people were staying with them, or why they were referring them, or what they loved. They would kill off something or double down on something or change their messaging. And that's the power. It's also why looking at these separately and not just as a group of the same things, like those nuances, right back to the flywheel, tell you about the humans that love you and that really want you to be successful because you make them successful. So customer engagement score, talk about this one.
Yeah, it's just looking at if you've got a software or product where somebody's logging in. Well, so they may say that they love you, but how are they actually using you? How often are they logging in? What does their usage look like?
Usage.
It's really about usage. And are they, adopting new features? Are they adding on new things? Are they taking advantage of trainings that you're offering? Are they really engaged? Is really what this one's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this one so much. And then time to value. I love this one because it's related to scorecard. And so talk to time to value. I tell the audience a lot about speed to revenue, but this is again about lead generation and leads turning into sales. But if we're thinking from a different perspective, let's talk about this semantic change.
Yeah, it's the same basic concept, but it's thinking about how long before they find you so valuable that they can't do without you.
Yes.
And that's obviously our ultimate goal, right? We all want that cult-like loyalty. I do some branding work and one of the examples I've always used is Apple has a great cult-like following of loyalty. In fact, I've seen people with Apple logos as tattoos and things. I mean, for someone to go to that level of commitment because they love the brand that much is awesome to me. So how do you get that embedded in somebody's culture that they love you enough that they want to tattoo your brand on their arm?
Yes, exactly. And I think what's so exciting, I mean, we could keep going on and on with metrics, but I think this list is such a solid one. What's so exciting is even inside the data, this takes us back to humans, hearts, decisions, value creation, and value is what the customer perceives as value, not what we intended the value to be. Right. And so in this scenario, and you're talking about the shift away from standard linear thinking to the flywheel and customer journey and sales mapping, or buyer journey, type of language. It's not just language. It really is about finding hidden opportunities that are right there in front of you, because revenue can come from so many places, value can come from so many places, and profit is hidden in these numbers. That's because right. This is what people actually care about that is already happening in your business. And so I get super excited about this one. Okay, any final tips, thoughts, warnings that you would give people?
Alignment is key. I think just really making sure that everyone's on the same page. I go back to the service level agreement we discussed earlier. I think that is so important to get everyone in the same page. It's it's just a tool, of course, but I found those exercises the most useful, because I've sat in rooms where I've seen marketing and sales and customer success and marketing saying, well, but that's not my job. I do this and I hand off to you, and sales is going, well, no, that's not my job. So we just uncovered a big area where nobody was taking care of the client. And no wonder we're losing people, because there's a pothole that we all missed.
And that is when revenue turns around quickly. I mean, like a lot of times you deploy something in marketing and you might see it next quarter or next half. But these are the kind of things that can turn the Titanic around extremely quickly and permanently, as long as you're really bringing, your whole thinking and that alignment to the table. Well, you guys, we would love to hear your questions. And thanks so much for joining in. Lisa, thank you so much for hopping on today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So just as a reminder, Stop limiting your thinking about growth. You don't want leads, you want revenue, and you want profitable, exciting revenue. And go beyond that. You're driving value. You already do. You already have a business that people are valuing. Now, how do you maximize that value with the insights that already live inside of your numbers, your humans, your clients, and your team right now? There's just so many ways to scale and to get that traction and momentum that you've been wanting to get. So we hope this served you well today. Would love to hear your questions, comments, and even your skepticism. Let's go. We're in this together. And so we appreciate you. Doggone it, hit that subscribe button. There's only there's another 10,000 people out there that are watching us every week. You should be one of them. So thanks so much, you guys. Onward and upward.